Welcome back. I have to say, from my perspective, I'm glad you came back, so I have someone to talk to. And welcome all. It's great to see a full room. It shows, really, from my perspective, it shows how quickly we change in the university. So between new staff coming in and people who've been here a little while, we run these sessions, I think, twice a year or less. So it's great from my perspective to get a chance to talk to you and to talk a little bit about what I do and what my broader team does. So I'm John Gill, I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and I'm responsible for a number of functions. And just like the change that's happening with you joining, there's changes happening in my team as well, so I can kind of take it through that a little bit, and we can talk at a high level about what my team does. Essentially, we're here, we're one of the central support units, and we're here to support the main aims of the university, which are in teaching and learning and also in research. So our services are really underpinning that and providing the supports that's required in order to teach the large intake of students and the ones that come back to us, and also to support some of the excellent research that goes on across the campus. In terms of the unit itself, you as staff members will be interacting with them at various levels, but taking it from the top, buildings and estates, IT or information solutions and services, our commercial services, which are largely the on-campus residences and also the restaurants and other retail outlets, so we manage those. Procurements and contracts, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Health and safety, which is actually quite central and important to everything we do. Then there are two here, student services and sports and recreation, that are joining my team. And human resources, which we're bringing to, it's going to report directly to the president on UMT, so it's going to move out of my team. So some things joining, some things moving, and some things evolving as we step forward. It's a very strong and capable team, so you have a number of different disciplines there. You know, as we look across the campus at buildings, you look at IT and the ISS services, and also at some of the commercial and procurement. So a wide and diverse range of skills across the team. But however, the collaboration across the teams needs to be quite strong as well. So that's why they sit together in the Chief Operating Officer's area. People are probably the most important thing in the university. They're important at two levels. So all of our students are absolutely critically important to us and how we look after them. It's important that we're supporting the research. It's also important that we're supporting the staff in the university. And HR, we've made investments in HR with more to come. Most recently, Josephine Hines has joined us as our Director of HR. She joined early in the summer, and she's looking at how we can reshape and relook at some of the services we're offering and how we can strengthen some of the ones that have been there already. But essentially everything that touches you from a human resources perspective is managed through that team. In terms of, in terms of benefits, policies, terms and conditions, etc., the website is the best place to start. And after that, it's really, you know, connecting with people who are in the department in terms of anything that's specific to your area or specific to you as an individual. We're continually looking at policies and how they might be reviewed and renewed, and staff engagement is really important to us. So as staff, you're critically important to us. Equally important, and I'll come to it with student services, are the students, both the undergrad and postgrad, that come to us also. Anyone who's new and who's walked through the campus, certainly I'm blown away by it. I think the buildings group and the estates group do a fantastic job in what they do. The original quad, for those that are new, was built during the famine. So when you kind of look at it, you think about, firstly, the difficulties people were going through at that time, and secondly, you think about what technology was available to them to build that structure. It kind of blows you away. And then if you go up north of campus and you look at the engineering building, which is probably one of our newer buildings, and you look at what's been done there, equally impressive. And we have everything in between. So you have everything from a listed building, so everything we do there needs to go through special procedures. I was told recently even the panes of glass that are in the windows, at least some of them, are listed in terms of, you can, glass flows over time, so they're thicker at the bottom than at the top. But everything in there, including a lot of the internal walls, you've got to be very careful in terms of what you do. If you go up to the engineering building, there's quite a lot that's been done there in terms of sustainability. So it's demonstrating the best of what we could achieve at that time. It's about 2 years old now. The research building next door, the human biology building next door to us here, is brand new as well. There's some very innovative things that have been done there from a construction perspective to support the work that goes on there. So you have quite a diverse campus, also quite a, you have everything from the old to the new. In order to run that on a day-to-day basis, it takes quite an operation, and to renew it, because obviously with that large estate of buildings or that large stock, everything needs to be done, from cleaning to changing the light bulbs to everything else that needs to be done there. One of the interesting things last year that was achieved is that as we look at our square meters, so we've more than doubled over the last 10 years in terms of square meters that we cover in terms of office space. We've actually reduced all of our energy consumption by 30% in the same time. So we've grown the number of lights we're using, the amount of heating, the amount of air conditioning, etc., etc. But we've reduced the overall consumption in terms of kilowatt hours. So that's something that's very central to us in terms of sustainability. And that goes through to the biodiversity of the estate. So as you walk through, you'll see quite a lot of effort in terms of keeping the gardens renewed, and they do look fantastic. There's a lot of effort that goes on in relation to that, and biodiversity along with sustainability is one of the key values that the Buildings and Estate Unit will be bringing to it. So they do all that. They also set up and change rooms around, so they support about 1,200 events a year out of the team in terms of what needs to be done, everything from setting up from exams to setting up for meetings like this. So quite a group of people. From a solutions and support perspective, all the IT we use, so from the Wi-Fi through to the fixed line connections, through to the telephony, through to the mobile phones that we use, right through to the procurement systems, the office systems, so Microsoft Office and other things, the desktop support, the laptop support, the systems we use to support academic administration, so that's the registration of students, their progression, how they select courses, how that's timetabled for them, so you've got quite a level of complexity there. They're kind of, you have to find a room that's big enough to house the class and ensure that the lecturer is available at that time. And I talked earlier about the geographical diversity of the campus, so you can't have someone at the north of the campus in a lecture between 10 and 11 and then expect them to be in the south of the campus between 11 and 12. So that whole piece is managed and administered through the systems. So ISS support all that. There's a level of ongoing support for the existing systems that we have, and there's a level of development and investment that we make in new systems going forward. So quite a team of people that do that. We've a lot of commercial interests both on campus, across the campus. Probably the most significant will be the student accommodation. So we house within Corrib Village, so that's just north of the engineering and the business school. We house about 760 students in Corrib Village. That estate is over 20 years old, so we go through year on year. So last year we did a big renewal around fire safety. We had to do a lot of work around the fencing to keep people out rather than keep people in. So when students have parties, you tend to get a lot of non-residents wanting to access. I think so. There's about 760 there. Last weekend we opened Goldcrest, which is our new student accommodation. There are 429 students housed there. They're quite unique in the way that they're set up. The students certainly love the buildings. When I was up there last week, I met two or three students, and I'm sure their parents wouldn't want to heard it, but they said these are very luxurious. So they're probably thinking, God, I could have got them something more basic. But what parents tend to like about it is particularly for first years, is that there's a whole security aspect around it. So our staff who look after security make sure that there's a level of additional safety for the first years. So a lot of them, it's their first time away from home. Some of them legally are still children. They're 17, they're not yet 18. So that tends to work quite well. Anne Duggan runs that team. So those accommodations are used for students in term time. We accommodate a lot of conference activity out of term time. So we have various conferences that run during the summer, various academic conferences, and the people who come to those are largely accommodated within Corrib Village, and next year within Goldcrest as well. We also have a number of sporting clubs that come to us through the summer period. So there was a junior under 14 level competition that was run this year, a soccer competition. Many of the teams stayed locally, so it's at that price point that attracts them, and it's from the perspective of if you're a coach or a parent looking after a number of children, the way it's set up there, they have individual rooms off a communal area. So for the students, you would either have 5 or 6 rooms off a common living area, shared cooking living area, but then you have privacy in your own room. So and the rooms themselves then are self-contained in terms of being en suite, etc., and having a study area. So they're quite impressive from that perspective. So commercial services look after that, and we use the accommodation in 2 ways: primarily to house our students, and secondly to support the conferencing. And anything that's left over after that is available to rent by the public for periods during the summer. So that's kind of another piece of it. The other part that commercial services run, so the shops that appear across the campus, or any commercial outlet, is managed through commercial services on a contractual basis. So there's a formal contract with every supplier, including all the restaurants and food outlets. So they're all managed through renewal contracts. There isn't one restaurant supplier across campus, there are several, and that's to give us some diversity in what we're doing as well. And we also support some social enterprise with the cafe in the ILAS building at the most north part of the campus. We support that, so it's while there is a contract in place for it, we're supporting it from a financial perspective as well, because I think it's the right thing to do from a social enterprise perspective. So commercial services are looking at all that, and they're also looking at and working with buildings and estates around various things that we might do in the future. So they're looking at how can we use the estate better, what other services are needed for staff and students, and how do we bring in the right people to do that from a competitive perspective. That brings me into procurements and contracts. So, for example, when we procure a new service, so we procured some restaurant services over the last couple of years, we actually go out to contract on those. We describe what it is we want, and people bid for that. And we have a methodology of analysing the bid. There's a team that analyse it, and we come up with a winner. So the best bid, as we would have described it, and they get the contract. So that happens with all of our services. So as we look at what it is we require, we typically go to tender for that, and that's quite important for us because the money that we invest here is largely government money. So it's really important for those of you that become budget holders. You must procure in line with the regulations. It's not an optional, it's a mandatory. It's something that we're audited on, it's something that we're inspected on, and it's something that we're expected to adhere to. And if we're not adhering to it, we face criticism at different levels, corrective actions as well. So procurement is something that we need to do correctly because we end up in a contract as a result of it. and it's important that we do that. The procurement office can support in relation to it, so there are cut-off points in terms of how you procure and what you need to do at different levels of procurement. So those who are budget holders, there is more than adequate procurement training that's given a number of times a year. I will get along to one of the training programs and make sure that you're working through. So we're procuring in a number of different areas. In the support services, we procure a lot of services. So I could say, for example, photocopier paper and stationery is something we would have procured on our own. That's now procured through an overall government grant or a government procurement. So we just latch on to, you may have heard of the OGP, the Office of Government Procurement. We just leverage that service. We don't have to do that procurement ourselves. We avail of the terms and conditions of that contract, and we can purchase through that, and that's set up for government-wide. There are other services that we might pick up locally, so they're unique to us. So there are procurements that we might want to do around research, so procurements around maybe particular pieces of equipment or particular chemicals or other services that we might want to require. They need to be procured in a controlled fashion and in a fashion that we can stand over from an audit perspective. So the CNAG, the Controller and Auditor General, their team come here on an annual basis and review everything we spend. They pull reports to show who had a contract before they spent, who didn't have. And we've got to explain why we didn't have contracts in place. To give that explanation, we're largely back to the person that spent the money. So you either end up doing it correctly in the first place or explaining why it wasn't done correctly after the fact. It's a lot easier to do it correctly in the first place. Take my word for it. But do get yourselves, if you're involved in purchasing or you're a budget holder, it's critically important that you're procuring in the right way. So get involved with the training in order to make sure that you're comfortable with that. Health and safety is something that's everyone's responsibility. We have a hugely diverse range of activities that we do here. So we've everything from functions, people that sit in what would be described as standard offices. So I'm working at a PC at a desk, I've got stuff on a shelf, etc. So it's pretty much standard office work. And that goes from a health and safety perspective, right through to people who are experimenting in labs and using potentially dangerous chemicals if they're mixed in the wrong way. There's two things that we're regulated on, and this is a legal responsibility for us. And the way the legals of it work is that the responsibility legally sits with the unit head. So the heads of unit have a legal responsibility to ensure that we're operating in a safe manner. So there's two things that we do. There's extensive training on this. One is that we expect each unit, and we're regulated to have a unit safety policy. And that basically sets out how you will operate safely in your unit. And the second thing we need, and we're regulated on, and we will chase people on, is that you have a risk assessment, so that you've assessed where the risks might be. So if I'm operating with dangerous chemicals, what's my risk assessment? Do I allow people to operate on their own, or do they always have to work with someone else? How do I use the chemical? So typically the manufacturer will give you instruction on how to use it. How will I dispose of it when I'm finished? And who will dispose of it? Right through to if I'm sitting in an office, I've got fan heaters going. Is that allowed? No, it's not. So don't use them, please. Have I got shelves? Am I storing a lot of heavy stuff on the higher shelves? You shouldn't be. Do I have a lot of paper sitting around, which can be a fire hazard? So you need to think about your environment, and from a health and safety perspective, training is provided on that. I'd encourage you to get along to it. Also, when I say it's everyone's responsibility, if you see something that isn't right, report it so that we can deal with it. If that's a carpet tile that people are tripping over, or if you see something going wrong, that the stuff that you think is dangerously stored, or we're doing this thing in the wrong way, let us know. There's a safety working group which is largely looking at the more serious end. So it's largely the people that will be working in wet labs that are doing experiments and that. But we also have good representation from buildings and estates in terms of physical safety. So do pay careful attention to it. Take responsibility for your own safety. And if you're a manager, take responsibility for the safety of those around you. And if you're a unit head, make sure that you're meeting your legal requirements. And again, there'll be training offered to people on that. And I wouldn't stress that. I can't stress that enough, that we're responsible for your safety. You have to be safe when you're here. That's our responsibility as leadership. And you have a part to play in that as well, whether you're managers, unit heads, or employees that are working in the environment. That's a bit more on the safety life cycle. I'm not going to go into that in detail here. Student services is a new area that's coming under my responsibility. And what student services are looking at are the support services that are needed by students as they come to us. So what we would call students who are, we have an access centre for people joining in that might need additional supports that wouldn't be needed by everybody, but by some. We have a disability centre for students that are less able and that might need additional supports. We look after student welfare, so in terms of counselling for students that may be struggling for one reason or another, giving them the supports they need, and that links into the HSE as well if we require that. We also support in terms of some of the academic units in terms of supports they might need with students that might be struggling for one reason or another on a programme. The services also link into the societies. So in terms of, we find that students who get to lectures, use the facilities, involve themselves in clubs and societies typically have a better experience than those that are not as engaged. And if you're having a better experience, you're more likely to have friends and colleagues you can reach out to if you need help, and then leveraging the students. So we're trying to be as proactive as we can in terms of the well-being of students, but it is a primary objective of that team, and it's something we're really, really interested in, is what's the experience of the student and what do we do from a support perspective to ensure that things don't fall through the gap. So our objective is to ensure that we're supporting the academic mission in terms of bringing the students in, progressing them through, staying for postgrad, or if they wish, or moving on into industry. And in the context of that, then there are programs that are running in terms of employability. We reach out to industry, they take people on gap years, etc. We're supporting all that type of activity as well. And in sports and recreation, we've over 50 active sports clubs. Across the full range of sports, so everything from archery, athletics, the sports that you might expect, Gaelic, hurling, soccer, rugby, the sports that are generally popular, mountaineering, hill walking, ones that are maybe less popular in secondary school, but people tend to engage with it a lot in terms of healthy living. We certainly see the direct link between recreation, engagement in terms of societies and clubs, and student well-being. So while we're with sports, there are two aspects to it. One is the competitive aspect, which delivers into an elite program, but the other is inclusion and engagement in terms of getting people involved, getting them to be active, which has a health promotion aspect to it, but also has a well-being aspect to it as well. You need one to drive the other. You need the elite to get the engagement, and you need the engagement to drive the elite. So they're conjoined. We have some scholarships that we drive through that as well. In terms of those that get involved in the sports area, so they're looking towards a competitive element, our strategy is to engage with the national bodies. So with the IRFU, with the FAI, with the GAA, and with the other governing bodies to make sure that our coaches are doing the right thing. They're following whatever the best practice is for that sport, and also that we're engaged with the sport in terms of leveraging their coaching. We're also looking at how that links to academic programs, so developing programs around sports management. So that there's a piece to that's running as well. But largely for any sport where we're competing, our strategy will be to partner with the governing body for the sport. And that makes sense because every club will typically be affiliated to its governing body so that you have the right behaviours in the administration of the club, and that the athletes or the people who are participating are trained in the right way and brought through. So that's my team. It's kind of a whistle-stop tour. I'm happy to stop and listen to questions. Hopefully I'll be able to answer them. So let me open it up.